Okay, now I'm delighted to be joined by James Holloway, who's the External Engagement Manager for the Northeast Fund. So thanks for joining me today, James.
No problem, Paul. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. So for anyone that doesn't know what the Northeast Fund is, do you just want to briefly explain what that is and what your role involves?
I guess I'll tell you a bit about the history and why the fund exists. So the Northeast, as a region of the UK's economy, receives roughly half of 1% of the total business investment activity in the UK. So that's obviously a really small figure. Part of that's because obviously we've got while we're quite large, we're a comparatively small business population, but there's another number of other reasons. Mainly that investors just don't look here. Investors live in places like London, Edinburgh, maybe some of the other bigger cities like Manchester. So when there's businesses here that might be growing and need investment, investors just don't have their eye on the region. There's also, I guess, the sort of linked problem that businesses, when they get to that stage and they need some funding, if they can't get the cash here, it's not because they're not a great business. It's just because they can't get the funding here. So a lot of businesses have essentially up stakes and left, which isn't great for the area, because if they're growing, if they're growing and creating jobs, essentially we want them to stay here. So the Northeast Fund is actually a part of an ongoing series of programs I've been running for about 15 years, which takes money from primarily from the European Investment Bank, and essentially aims to fill the gap in the funding markets in the Northeast. So unlike most other European funded programs in the area, most of the European funded programs do either grant funding or funded support, so it's free for businesses to access. The Northeast Fund, it's essentially we've essentially borrowed the money from the European Investment Bank, so we have to pay it back. So it's doled out in the forms of business loans, typically unsecured lending. So it can be quite attractive to business owners in that there's nowhere they're not putting their own personal financial stake on the line. It's purely unsecured for the business, and also equity investment, which there's very little of in the way of private investment activity in the Northeast. So we've got £120 million. We're aiming to invest that into about 600 businesses by March 2023. Although over the past 6 months, things have been a bit interesting to say the least, in terms of the fund was designed to help support growing businesses. And while there have been some great stories, there's a lot of businesses in the area essentially in need of emergency funding rather than growth funding. So the landscape's changed a bit, but we're still very much open for business. We've made some little shifts where we can in terms of what the fundings can be used for, and we'd love to speak to anyone who's out there looking for finance. We do investments in the range from 10 grand at the lower end up to 2 million at the top end. So quite a range of in what we can lend out, and also the size of business that we can support.
Brilliant. So am I right? There's five different types of funding available. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, the £120 million is split into 5 different pots, essentially based on what size of finance you're looking for. There's 3 loan funds, which roughly speaking do loans of £10 to £100,000, 100 up to 500, and 500 up to 2 million. And then there's also 2 equity funds, which tend to invest out up to £500,000 and up to £1 million, respectively. As a starting point, we usually say come and talk to us first, because I know if you get a leaflet and you have all these options available, it can be a bit sort of overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out in looking for finance. So we do say come and have a chat with us, and we can sort of point you in direction of which of those 5 to have a look at. But each of them's got quite different goals in terms of how it operates and what sorts of businesses they're looking to support.
Yeah. So people can go on the website, obviously the Northeast Fund website, and they can have a bit of an overview of the different types of funding. Remind me what's the web address again?
It's www.northeastfund.org.
Okay, so yeah, it's all on there. It's pretty clear. But then if people want to have a chat is it you and is there one other?
Yeah, myself and Andrew Gibson were hired essentially as points of contact for the fund. In previous programs, the funds again have been split and businesses were encouraged to speak to who they thought was the most relevant fund, and businesses are very much still able to do that. But if they really don't know where to start, they can come and speak to myself. If you're in the particularly the coastal areas of the region, I'm typically on the ground in Northumberland, South Tyneside, Sunderland, and Newcastle, and my colleague Andrew is usually out and about in Durham, Gateshead, and North Tyneside. Although it's a bit less in person these days, we're still very much open and trying to speak to businesses in those areas.
Yeah. So I'll share a link or links underneath this video in the Facebook group. But if anyone wants to message you directly, they can tag you in, or they can reply to any comment that you put in there as well.
Absolutely.
So of that 120 million, I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but is there any money left to get?
Yeah. It's we were roughly on target with investments up until the beginning of the lockdown area, and like I say, we're still investing until March 2023. So there's still a lot of money in the pot. We're very much open for business, and things have slowed down a bit. So I guess just put it one way, we're essentially behind investment targets, although we've got a bit of leeway given what's happening in the economy. But so businesses are still very much encouraged to apply to us and come and have a chat about what they can access.
Yeah. Okay. And is there a particular type of business that you're interested in, or would you say some funds are more applicable to a certain type of business than others, or has that changed a little bit as well?
We're really trying to say that we're here for everyone. I guess in some senses, the Northeast as a whole can be seen as a bit of a microcosm of the UK as a whole. I said before, a lot of the Northeast receives very little private investment comparative to the UK, and there's certain parts of the Northeast that receive little investment compared to others. So, for example, placed in rural Northumberland, rural Durham, they're as much eligible for this funding as a business in Newcastle. So that could be the cool new tech startup working out of a co-working space in Newcastle, or it could be a 200-year-old metal fabrication company out in the middle of Northumberland. So whatever sector you're in, we're quite flexible. Like I say, we're European funded, so there are some sector guidelines in terms of what we're doing, but we've been pushing back on that a little bit because, as I said before, we're not the usual European funded program. We're here to support all sorts of businesses. So whichever sector you're in and whatever size you are, and also whatever stage you're at as well, there might well be something that we can do. And over the past few months, myself and Andrew have been really acting as, I guess, more broader funding advisors. There's a lot of businesses who have different funding needs at the moment, and while the Northeast Fund is very much open for business, it might not be, I guess, set for what you need personally. So we've been keeping up to date on terms of the rest of the funding landscape, and doing a lot of I guess referring out to other funding programs out there, because it can be a bit of a nightmare. The guidance and other things out of there sometimes aren't great in terms of really identifying what your needs are. So we're here to chat with businesses. We're not I guess we're not paid on commission or anything like that for investments. So we're engaged to be funding advisors rather than just to plug the Northeast Fund. So like I said, there's a lot out there, so do come and talk to us.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think there is a lot of value in having someone like yourself who understands the inside out all the different funding available, but can translate that to the non-expert, because not everybody does know all the finer details of the funding. But yeah, it's one thing just having the information on a website, but still you need to talk to someone and then move on the correct way to go for your, not just your business, but your appetite as well, like what you personally want to go for and are willing to take on as well. Because sometimes the only way to grow a business is through debt, take it on, but it's not right for everyone. And you're not pushing people down any particular route. You're advising them.
Absolutely, and something we're really keen on doing, and it's part of the reason the funds like this were set up in the first place, is that and you still speak to a lot of people these days who who might have a mate who started up a business 15 years ago, and they went to the council and they got given a 10 grand grant to buy a van and some tools and things like that. Those days are quite long gone. So we're trying to, I guess, speak to businesses and say essentially that funding is a pretty normal process for businesses to do. It doesn't mean if you go out and say, actually, I think I've hit a bit of a cap on where I can grow organically. At saying to someone, actually, you know, if I had this much money in the bank, this that could really take things to the next level. And saying that isn't in one way, I guess, admitting that you're not doing great. It's actually saying, you know what, if business to business, you've got cash flow issues, actually having a lump of money in the bank to do something is what unlocks growth for most businesses. And taking on funding is very normal for most growing businesses to do that.
Yeah. So how obviously COVID's affected everyone, but how has that affected the fund or the work that you've been doing?
COVID's, I guess, put it mildly, had a bit of an impact. As I said before, we're primarily here to support growing businesses, but at the moment there's a lot of businesses in need of emergency funding, which unfortunately we can't do. There's businesses there who are saying, I need something just to keep the lights on, and because of that, the government schemes that have been released, I guess I definitely don't want to say it's been a negative thing. I think the government schemes have been fantastic in a lot of ways to help rescue businesses, but they've essentially some of them have rendered some of what we do, I guess, obsolete. Right back at the start, there was a lot of businesses who received essentially no questions asked grants to keep them going for however long that needed. For businesses who were in dire straits, if they couldn't open the doors to trade, then that grant enabled them to keep on jobs. But there's also a couple of other schemes out there that have had a bit of an interesting impact in what we're doing. The one that always comes to mind first is it's called the Government Bounce Back Loan. And I'd say to anyone, if you're considering taking on funding, get a bounce back loan rather than anything else, because you'll never get a better business loan than that. Interest rates just 2.5%, which is cheaper than you'll get just about anywhere else. There's no payments to be made for the first year, and the government guarantees the whole lending. So if you do think, actually, you know what, I could the bounce back loan lends up to 50 grand. So if you've got a funding need of up to that and you're eligible for the bounce back loan, please do take it. It's you'll never get a better deal than that. So our investments have gone down in terms of what we were targeted to do, but we're still going out and hopefully making a bit of an impact. And there's a lot of businesses, while some are in, I guess, emergency mode, there's also a lot of businesses who thought, actually, this has given me the chance to either put in place these plans that they've had for months and years, but have just been in the back of their mind and never been able to do because of the day-to-day runnings of business, or also businesses who have by necessity been forced to adapt and have needed some funding to do that. So we are still lending out to businesses in those sorts of situations.
Mm-hmm. Well, on those two things, the bounce back loan, I actually took out a bounce back loan for my business at the start of lockdown, and again, even though it's debt, it's a loan, and I'd rather not be taking on a loan if possible. It was because of not being able to do the physical start of week events and doing the online ones, having to put in the loss of revenue. This, it was to keep me going.
Absolutely. So I've got nothing but praise for the schemes that are out there. So while I know some of them are closing down for businesses after bigger funding, there's the coronavirus business loan intervention scheme, the CBILS, that's closing in about a week's time. That's for loans of above the bounce back threshold. But again, the government guarantees in terms of what you get on those funding options means that they're probably preferable to just about anything else in the market out there at the moment.
I definitely. I was really impressed because the CBILS came out first, but a lot of micro businesses couldn't get that. They were finding it difficult to get it, but the government listened and responded and created the bounce back. And what I thought was really impressive was because I've been trading for a few years now. So there's certain criteria that you have to have. Basically, it was all run through the bank, through my business bank.
Yeah.
So logged in through my online business bank, so they knew who I was.
Yeah.
It was just, what's your annual turnover? How much do you want to borrow? And as long as it was, I think it's less than 25% of your annual turnover. As long as the amount of money I wanted to borrow was less than 25%. And then the next week was just a load of tick boxes. Do I understand what I'm getting?
Yeah.
And it was, like you say, interest free for 12 months, nothing to pay back for 12 months until the 13th month, 2.5% interest rate. So it was the quickest, easiest, cheapest way to borrow money. And I got immediate decision. And then the money paid into the bank account 36 hours later.
Yeah, we're I guess jokingly within the team we're saying it's going to create some interesting expectations because most funding processes it isn't like that. Sadly, it usually takes a bit longer. There's usually a bit more of an application process. So I guess we're all waiting to see if that does change how. I guess first of all, if that changes how businesses expect things to work, which because obviously if you think to yourself, actually, you know what, I need some funding. In general, business owners and entrepreneurs are go-getters. They want it done now. Whereas for us, even our quickest investment process is usually looking at least a couple of weeks on the application turnaround. So I guess we're going to find it interesting to see if that's changed expectations on how things work, and also I guess if we can change how we do things. As I said before, where when we lend out, we as a fund have to pay it back as well. So we have to do proper due diligence to ensure that that the money's going into good businesses who can repay it, either as a loan or they're going to make a good return on an equity investment. So due diligence is usually a pretty big part of what we do. So I guess we'll wait and see how the current schemes have impacted that, and I guess also it's again, this is great for us. There've been people taking out things like bounce back loans essentially to pay us back because the bounce back loans are a lot cheaper. If you can use that to clear other debts, again, that's a great way for businesses to essentially reduce costs in the long run.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you made there because it just showed the speed at which things can be done if the government and the banks just relax the criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the other side of it is not sure how true a lot of these stories are. There's going to be inevitably stories of fraud and so on. But I think for the vast majority of people taking out these funds, the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it was just like you say, clever, but pre-qualified. I wasn't just a random. They knew who I was because I was logged into the business bank account. But and the other point you made as well, during the lockdown, it's kind of not forced me, but made me do things faster than I was maybe going to do them, because I think I might have talked to you before about this. You maybe seen I've launched a new business called Tribe with two co-founders, and basically what that is meant to do is be like a signpost and matchmaking service to do what happens at the start of week, but all year round at scale. And speed up the process of matching people to the support or the funding that they need. So based on the information people supply, if they pre-qualify for certain funding or certain investment, it would flag them up to the fund managers or people like yourselves. So you can say, oh, well, these guys, they've already done everything that they need to do, and we think that they're in the market for our type of funding, or they're worth a conversation. So look, maybe even before they know that they're eligible, and just make your life as well. So that's what we're doing now. So I need to have a chat with you about that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned before, not just the Northeast Fund, but the other funding that might be available. Well, there's the bounce back loans, but is there anything else that you're aware of, like regionally specifically?
I guess a lot of it depends on what sort of funding you're after, where you are, and what you're doing. Yes, this is called Startup Week. So the most appropriate one, and probably the one that would do a large number of referrals to, is a British government initiative called the Startup Loan Fund. While we do loans to businesses in the startup stages, if a business is qualified for a startup loan, I'd say always consider the two options. The Startup Loan Fund has been around for quite a number of years now, and it's essentially what it says on the tin. If a business is less than 2 years old and needs some funding, they usually have a headline of up to £25,000 per partner / entrepreneur in the business, up to 4 people. So a business with 4 co-founders could, in theory, access up to 100 grand. Then they'd be eligible to apply for the British government startup loan. As I say, it's a British government scheme we're EU funded, so there's a number of differences. First of all, the startup loan fund doesn't have the sector restrictions that we do. It's there for pretty much everyone, and I know there's businesses of a huge range of what businesses have done. There's anything from photographers. I've seen a traveling circus get one. Honestly, there's all sorts. The startup loan fund scheme, if you are looking for a business loan and you're in a startup, I'd say have a close look at what they do. They're a bit cheaper than us interest rate wise. They're usually on a fixed 6% interest rate. Whereas ours, the interest rates usually begin at 8% and can be a bit more flexible, usually going upwards, unfortunately. The flip side of that is the startup loans are delivered as personal loans. So if the business doesn't go the way things are planned, it's essentially secured on the directors or partners in the business to pay it back. So even if the business doesn't work out, the loan's with them personally, so they have to pay it back. So while we may be a bit more expensive, it's unsecured lending, and it's more expensive to reflect that risk. So essentially, if the business doesn't work out and it closes down, the debt's written off. So that's a scheme that does a huge number of investments. It's managed by a few companies locally. There's a company called Tedco, another company called Transmit, who deliver that, and also for young entrepreneurs, the Prince's Trust is active in what they do. In terms of other funds that are out there, I'd say the first place to look would always be to have a chat with your local council, because there's a few grant schemes out there, most of which are one way or another operated either by the local council or a company engaged by them. So, for example, if you're in Durham, there's a lot of grant funding out there, particularly for businesses in the sort of tech and digital sphere. So there's a program called Digital Drive Durham and a number of others that, again, businesses are able to access grant funding from. When I say grant funding, the majority of these work in a similar sort of way, in that you go to the grant provider, you'd present what your planned expenditure is, and if you're approved, the grant funder will agree to fund a percentage. It's usually variable up to 40, although a lot of them are trying to push that rate down. They'll agree to fund a percentage of that program, of that project. So it's essentially on you to say, I've also got the remaining funding, and go from there. So, like I say, there's funding in Durham available for that, for projects of all sorts of sizes. There's also a number of other schemes active at the moment. So I'll just go through a couple of them. One of them is called the North of Tyne Growth Fund. So that's for businesses who, as the name suggests, are in the North of Tyne area. So that's Newcastle, Northumberland, and North Tyneside. That's another grant fund scheme that can provide some part expenditure for capital projects. So essentially, you're planning on spending the money on stuff rather than going into revenue if you're buying machinery or anything like that. And that's for quite large projects. I'm just on their website now. The minimum investment or the minimum project size is £134,000, and they'll support up to 30% of that if you're eligible. So that's for quite large programs out there at the moment. For businesses in rural areas, there's another similar program called the North of Tyne Rural Business Growth Fund. Again, that's for businesses who are in rural areas. And this funding is designed to support the growth of businesses outside of usual city/town areas. So I used to work with the company who's delivering that. So, as an example, a lot of businesses in Northumberland, there's a big push to get business growing across the whole county rather than just in the main industrial areas of Cramlington. So, so for example, if you're in a rural area, that might not just be Northumberland; it might be more specifically a rural part of Northumberland. Again, there's grants. There's grants to support businesses making expenditure there, and but otherwise, I'd say like I said before, as a first stop, speak to your council. I know a lot of councils sometimes get a bit of stick, but I've found in general they're really helpful and they really want businesses to grow. And sometimes even if it's not a specific program with a nice logo and so on, they sometimes have discretionary funding for businesses who are doing interesting stuff. So make sure you do speak to them on that.
Yeah. I think the councils have done a really good job during the lockdown as well, of not only communicating what's going on at a national level that people can tap into, but just responding in taking some of the funds that maybe being allocated somewhere else and diverting it into new ways. So definitely encourage people getting in touch with the council. So would that just be like a business team? If you go onto the council website, they've usually got a business department, and
a lot of them have, especially in the northeast, they've got essentially separate economic development teams who, I think I'm just trying to think if any of them don't, but a lot of them have a separate, almost like a separate branding. So, for example, I live in South Tyneside. South Tyneside Council's business growth service called Invest South Tyneside. The one I mentioned before in Northumberland, the Rural Business Growth Service is managed by Advanced Northumberland. In Durham, their economic development arm is called Business Durham. So in general, if you search business support and then your local council area, you'll probably get directed to a separate website, which has usually got a bit more, I guess, commercial branding and so on. And it's usually got a bit of a, I guess, a strappier name than just South Tyneside Council Business Support. It's usually got a bit of a brand of its own.
Yeah. Great. That's excellent advice. Because I mean, even some of that, I kind of knew it, but I'd forgotten some of it. So it's good to you just you pick up new things all the time. But
it's always changing.
Right. But the councils have always been really good. Like years ago, when I used to work for Shell Livewire, which is like a youth enterprise, I would always encourage people to get in touch with the local council or the local enterprise organisations. So
absolutely,
like TEDCO or the Northeast BIC or Project Northeast, these different organisations, because sometimes they have grants available or that or loans. Or if nothing else, they'll be aware of initiatives or ways to save money as well. So
absolutely, and they're also usually quite good in offering hands-on support to actually make the application. If it's something you've never done before, or if it's just something you frankly don't have time to do yourself, there's usually support there. Like I said before, these sort of non-financial support programs. Essentially, there's funding from somewhere or other, whether that's local council funding or European Regional Development funding, essentially paying for people to be business advisors and help businesses through the funding process.
Yeah, no, that's great. And is that something? Do you help people with their applications as well, or
we don't ourselves in terms of hands-on? This is how to fill in the application form. However, the program that we've got does offer a lot of wider business support. Well, this program, unlike the previous programs, for example, the Jeremy Fund, as well as financial investment targets, we also have a lot of non-financial support targets. So there's a lot of businesses receive, as well as funding, they also receive non-financial support in terms of some of the fund managers, for example, run business accelerator programs. There's a lot of companies who run who essentially engage business trainers to help on certain items. So I know there's been recently things like NEL fund managers have run a program called Managing Your Money, which is sort of taking a frank look at why you're in business. What do you want out of it? How much do you want to earn from it? And saying how do you get there? So it's working with an external trainer with a bit of a funding slant. So it's not saying if you want to earn this much, take out some finance. It's saying if you want, what do you want out of your business and how do you get there? So it's not sort of hands-on hand-holding through the application process. We do offer a lot of support for businesses on that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Well, that's brilliant advice. Is there anything else that you want to say about the Northeast Fund?
I guess just say if you are interested, if you want to know a bit more about either what we do, or if you just want to have a chat about if funding is right, it's not right for everyone. Sorry. As soon as I get on a video call, just say if you are interested in funding and if it's right for you, do just give us a call. We're not here to sort of push people into doing one thing or another. We're just here to give advice on if funding's right for you, and also if it is, where's the best place to look.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. And if anyone does have any questions, just post them underneath this under this video. But I'll be sharing some links to places that you mentioned as well underneath. And if people want to send you a direct message or contact you through the website, then to do that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Right. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks, James. We appreciate you doing that. Okay.
Thanks very much, Paul. Bye.